Hey, Herman, I'm going over some of these problems with you, and hopefully these are going to help you with this decimal division. So I was looking over your work, and your actual long division is perfect. You got the right digits in all these numbers, but on some of them you don't have the decimal point in the right place. Some of them turned out right, some of them didn't. All right, so I ran off these particular questions so we could look at what do you need to do to make sure you get your decimal point in the right place. All right, that other corny video that I sent you, it goes over these same sorts of things with a little more detail. So you might want to take a look at that too if you have any questions. All right, so in this first particular problem right here, it started out, it was this problem on the slides, 465.5 divided by 5. Okay, now remember, this is your quotient. Nope, this is called your divisor. And this is your dividend. All right, now that's, I'm just reminding you of those words because I'll be using them when I'm talking about this. All right, so in this particular problem, you wrote it down correctly. You had your decimal point here, all right, and your divisor here. All right, so you shifted this decimal point in this problem and you really didn't need to. All right, so how do you know when you need to or not need to? Well, you have to look at the divisor. When the divisor is a whole number, but you've got a decimal point in here, you have to go straight up on the decimal point. So this would be correct if it was 93.1. Okay, so that's important. When do you know when to shift that decimal point over in your quotient? I mean, when do you know when to shift that decimal point in your dividend? When this has a decimal point, you shift it. But if it doesn't, this is a whole number right here. So I don't need to shift my decimal point. I just go straight up. All right, so the rule is when you are dividing by a whole number, the rule is just straight up on the decimal or up on the decimal point. The dividend. All right, so I just think of it, if I'm dividing by a whole number, I just go up with the decimal point. All right, so number 3 turned out perfectly. You had that situation where you had the number 9 divided by 30. You put 9 inside the box where it's exactly where it was supposed to be, and you were dividing by 30. So this again, here's your divisor. And your divisor, is it a decimal number or is it a whole number? Well, it's a whole number. And so I needed to just go straight up on the decimal point. You put a decimal point in here and you annex to 0, which is correct. And then you just go straight up on the decimal. It didn't have to shift it. All right. All right, now number 4. You got that one correct too. All right, I'm going to look this over real quick so you can compare it. And you did it exactly right. You said 0.9, which was your dividend right here, divided by 0.3, and that was your divisor. And then you shifted that decimal to the right, made it 10 times bigger, and so you did the same exact thing in your dividend. All right, and then you went up on your decimal point. All right, and I call that over, up. All right, so in that over, up simply means if my divisor has a decimal point in it, I'm going to have to make it 10 times larger to turn it into a whole number before I start my division. And that means if I do that to the divisor, I have to do the same thing to my dividend to keep them balanced with each other, to keep it an equivalent problem. All right, so let's take a look at this number 5. Now your digits are exactly right, 24, or 2 and a 4. All right, but what happened here was this was the problem, 12 divided by 5, or excuse me, 0.5. And so when you shifted over on your divisor, but you didn't on your dividend. So you had to shift over and make that 10 times bigger. So you did what I'm calling again, if I'm got a decimal point out here and I go over, then I have to do over and then up. Okay, in the video that, or the slides that we were using, Google Slides, they called it the decimal dance. That if you have a decimal out here, then you're going to have a decimal in here inside the box, and they are going to dance together. This shifts one, this shifts one, and so they will both go over at the same time. So they called that the decimal dance, decimal partner dance. All right, so the answer for this would have been 24 with a decimal point, or just the number 24, because 24 point is the same thing as 24. All right. All right, so number 6. This has a decimal point here. Okay, and you said 4 goes into 16, 4, you did that. All this is exactly right. The digits in the quotient 411 is exactly right. This is a whole number, so you don't shift anything. The rule is you just go up. So 41.1 is correct. All right, so why was 2 remainder 1 not counted correct here? Well, I want to clarify all this. Herman, you're going to get full credit for this, okay? You have all the credit on this that everybody else is getting. I just want you to make sure you know how to do this. If you are working with decimal numbers, then I want to give my answer as a decimal. And I go over more of that in the video. Watch it. I think it'll be helpful. You wrote it down correctly, 2 divided by 5. I mean, yeah, I messed that up. 5 divided by 2. All right, and you said 2 goes into 5 2 times. 2 times 2 is 4. You subtracted, you have 1 left over. All right, when I want a decimal remainder, I'm going to put a decimal point at the end of my whole number. Then I'm going to annex the 0, and then I'm going to bring it down. And I'm going to think 2 goes into 10 5 times. 5 times 2 is 10, 0 left over. All right, and then I look back up at my answer. I know it's not 25. I just have a decimal point inside of my box here. So I'm just going to go straight up. I just have the decimal point in the dividend. I go straight up. So the answer is 2.5. And if you think of that, 2 remainder 1 over here, that's the same as 2, and if I wrote that as a fraction, that would be 1 over 2. And I know 2.5, which is what that is equal to, is equivalent to 2.5. So this is 3 different ways you can write a decimal number with a remainder. I can write it as a whole number remainder, 2 remainder 1. My remainder is a whole number. I can write it as a fraction, 2 1/2. The part that was left over was half of what's the group size I was putting it in, or 2.5. Okay, so Herman, overall, your work on all the division was great. You have all the right digits in your answer. I just want you to make sure that you have this placement of the decimal point, because that's going to make your answers in 6th grade either right or wrong. You can do all the math right and not put that decimal in the right place, and it's going to get it marked as incorrect. All right, so the rules are, if you are dividing by a decimal number, like in number 5, I'm dividing by a decimal number, I'm going to have to move that over. And if there's no decimal in this number in here, I'm going to have to put 1, annex a 0, and move it over. So that's called over, over, up. And then I will work it and solve it. In this particular problem, I have 9 divided by 30. This is a whole number. So I'm not going to be doing that shifting of the decimal point. I don't need to move anything over here. However, I do have to still put a decimal point here and x is 0 so that I can do that division, but I'm just going to go straight up on that decimal point. Why am I going straight up? Because my divisor is a whole number. Why did I choose to shift it in this problem? Because my divisor is a decimal number. So you got to look at that divisor to decide if you're going to move the decimal point or not move the decimal point. All right, and remember, this is your divisor. All right, Herman, I hope this helps you. I hope you're feeling much better, Miss Gracie, and hopefully this is helpful. All right, bye.